Hey, good Tuesday morning, guys. The new update for Dorian just came out. More good news. Again, we talked about it earlier this morning. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to pull up this live on my phone. That way I can check your comments and questions as they roll in. Hope you all having a good morning so far. Let me make sure that I got the sound working. I know I've been messing that up. Sound looks good. I'm pulling this up on my phone real quick, guys, so give me 1 second before we start. There we go. Got it up on my phone. Now, just a reminder, if you guys have any comments, any questions, throw them in the comments. I do have this live pulled up on my phone, and I can check out what you guys are saying there. So if you have any issues, morning Jose, if you guys have any issues, any questions, I'll do my best. There is about a probably 10-15 second lag from where I'm at to the actual live stream. So again, if I don't get your question immediately, that's probably why. So the newest update on Hurricane Dorian just came out. Another downgrade. This is great news, folks. Again, yesterday's forecast, we were talking about a major hurricane all up the coast. We had Florida in the cone. Things were looking more grim. Things are looking a bit more optimistic now. Now, again, this is speaking mainland U.S. This is speaking mostly east coast of Florida, east coast of Georgia. They're up and down the Atlantic. Not going to be kind of talking about the Bahamas here. Again, that was worst case scenario for the Bahamas as Dorian just kind of sat on top Freeport, those areas there down towards Grand Bahama Island, and just pummeled them. Some of those videos, pictures that are coming out, circulating on social media, just heartbreaking seeing that. Now for Florida, this is a better case scenario. Last week we were talking about a landfalling major hurricane around Labor Day or the day after, right on the east coast or the southeast coast. Look where we are now. Florida's not even in the cone anymore. So that is excellent news. So we are not anticipating a landfall here. We got pretty good model agreement with all of our major hurricane models that Dorian here will not be making landfall in Florida. So again, that's great news. Right now it's Category 2. We are probably not even going to be seeing some hurricane force winds in Florida. I think that we might see some gusts upwards, again, hurricane force, but assuming that Dorian follows this track laid out by the National Hurricane Center, even inches a little bit to the left, we're just going to be dealing with tropical storm force winds along the immediate coast, and those wind speeds really go down further inland. Should be minimal impact. Again, coastal communities up and down the barrier islands, those areas that have been evacuated, they'll likely be dealing with coastal erosion. That's going to be a big issue. I've already seen it in pictures over at the beaches. They're going to be dealing with storm surge up to a couple feet. They will see tropical storm force winds and these very squally weather with heavy rainfall and gusty winds. But it is not a direct impact from a major hurricane. So we can throw the loop of Dorian on. This is over the past 6 hours, and you can see Dorian's really working northward there. And again, look at the presentation at the beginning of the eye, and then look where it is towards the end. So what happened is Dorian was a Category 5 hurricane. As big as it gets, it was the tied for the strongest storm to ever make landfall in the Atlantic Basin behind the 1935 Labor Day hurricane in the Keys. What happened is it stalled out. It lost that upper level steering flow. And what happens is that the storm just kind of churns in place, and it churns in place. And the main component for these storms to get stronger, it's warm water on the ocean. And the Bahamas had a very warm water. That's why we got a Cat 5. But as the storm sits in place and it's stationary and moves in the same spot, it churns up all that cooler water underneath, and then it weakens itself. So it kind of did it to itself, and you can see that presentation not looking as good. We're getting winds in Palm Bay. Yep, Jennifer, my family's actually from Brevard. I have some family in Palm Bay, and I've been seeing some videos out of there. Very squally weather coming through. Again, this isn't saying that just because the storm's downgrading and staying offshore, you're not going to get bad weather. The weather's going to be bad, but it's not going to be major hurricane directly on shore bad. You're going to get these tropical storm force winds for most folks. It's going to be squally, it's going to be windy, it's going to be nasty, rainy. Still not great weather to be outside for today. And then tomorrow a little bit further up the coast through central Florida kind of overnight. But again, this is shaping up to be a much better impact for us here locally. The Bahamas is a totally different story. The Bahamas was worst case scenario. Grand Bahama Island could not have gotten a worse draw here. Again, the storm surge was 18 to 23 feet above normal tide level. There were videos and pictures of people stuck in their attic. There are pictures of water coming up to the second floor of people's homes. So an absolutely heartbreaking situation there for the Grand Bahama Island, the Abacos, and that's going to be a recovery effort that will likely take years. Again, communication's really not up yet. They do have the Coast Guard going down there doing rescues as we speak. So they're working on that recovery. South Carolina, let's get to the track. South Carolina is kind of in a similar boat to us here as areas along the Florida coast, as they're expecting a close brush by. This is going to be, again, if you are from South Carolina, if you remember Matthew in 2016, I'm going to compare this storm to Matthew a lot because Matthew took an extremely similar track right up the East Coast, even closer. It was about 40, 50 miles offshore. This forecast to be around 70-ish miles. So Matthew was even stronger. Matthew was a Cat 4 as it went up the Florida coast. But we're going to be seeing this storm right up the coast. For South Carolina, I think that it's going to be the same. If you live right along the coast up through these coastal communities, you're going to see a couple inches of rain, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. You're going to see gusty winds, very squally weather with tropical storm force winds, but you're not most likely getting that direct landfall from a major hurricane. Again, it's going to be weakening as it gains latitude. You got a Cat 2 up here, but we'll see. This has been weakening extremely quick, and it's still in the cone. You still could have a landfall, but for the most part, you're going to be spared from those real direct impacts. Just depends on where you live. If you're further inland, I think that maybe some inland rainfall, localized flooding, but really no major impacts felt from this unless we see that landfall. So if you guys have questions, again, shoot them in the comments. For all of our neighbors down in the rest of the state, we do have a handful of watches, warnings, advisories that have been issued ahead of Dorian. And again, it's weakening, so that's good news. Hurricane warnings in effect all up and down the coast up through the South Carolina part of it. And then inland, shaded in orange, these are tropical storm warnings. Now again, I think that we're going to be seeing just tropical storm force winds. You might get some hurricane force gusts, but really area wide, this is not going to be a catastrophic, devastating storm force here in Florida up and down the coast. We are kind of getting lucky with this track staying offshore, and it's starting to pick up speed. You can see this trough here that we've been forecasting that's going to be able to keep Dorian offshore. We are not going to deal with any kind of landfalling system here because this trough came to save the day. You can really see it digging deep now, right down in the state of Florida. And this trough is going to, again, it's going to keep Dorian offshore. So what Dorian's going to do, finally starting to work northwest, but this trough won't let it in. So that's why we have that track kind of riding right up it as that upper level high pressure breaks down. And this trough, with all this drier air behind it, is going to wrap us around that backside of the circulation. Again, storms rotating counterclockwise. So we got a lot of dry air coming into our forecast here in Tallahassee later on this week. Our forecast is hot and it's dry. You would think with a major hurricane, something right offshore the Atlantic, we might be getting some kind of adverse effects. We're not. Our forecast looking pretty quiet. Temperatures in the mid to upper 90s. It's going to be above normal. It's going to be sunny. And the rain chances locally at least will be further east for today and tomorrow. The closer you live to I-75, the better chance you have at seeing some rain. So again, this trough finally coming to save the day, and that's going to be keeping our direct impacts really limited. For winds, again, I think tropical storm force is about the extent of that. Here's a look at the sustained winds as Dorian kind of rides up the coast, and once you kind of maximize this, see it as close as it gets, look at these numbers up through St. Augustine, Jacksonville, and Tybee Island near Savannah. We have these sustained winds in the 30s. That's almost tropical storm force. Tropical storm force is 39. So if this storm continues to weaken as it rides up the coast, we might not even get that in North Florida. I think Central Florida will at least see that. Maybe some gusts near hurricane strength. But for the most part, Dorian's weakening, thanks to the upwelling of cooler water sitting in place, was the best thing that could have happened to us. It's the worst thing that could have happened to the Bahamas. So again, I'm not trying to sound insensitive. I'm trying to localize this forecast and let you know the impacts that we're expecting. The Bahamas, again, that's worst case scenario. Couldn't have gotten worse for them with the size, the strength of the storm, and the way it's stalled out, which isn't very common, but it does happen. We've seen it in the past few years with Florence and Harvey. So it's not unprecedented, but it's unusual. It's just due to the lack of steering flow in the upper levels. So areas, the Abacos, Grand Bahama Island, absolutely wrecked from this storm. But locally, again, it's going to be windy for areas on the coast. Once you get inland, look at our winds, 10, 15, 20 miles per hour. That's not too bad, you know. It's just a little bit of a breezy day. So you're not going to know that a hurricane is offshore when it's sunny and breezy. Rain is really not even going to creep that far inland. thanks to Dorian once it starts moving in here. So again, areas up and down the coast throughout the day today into tomorrow, they're going to be getting lashed by these outer bands of Dorian, seeing the squalls push on shore, some periods of heavier rainfall you saw there. And it's also possible that they do see some water spouts push on shore. Again, those typically don't last long, nothing like a big tornado outbreak, but you could see some of those spin-ups. Once a Dorian gets up through North Florida tomorrow afternoon, look, this rain, nothing really impacting us. Again, we are wrapped around the drier side of the circulation, pulling in that air, and it sinks as it comes down. So that subsidence sinking air is going to warm, it's going to expand, it's going to be hot, it's going to be sunny. And lift is one of the main components for rain. So we're not really going to be seeing much in the way of convective showers or storms, just some kind of feeder bands barely making it over towards I-75 into some of our further eastern counties, Tallahassee westward, really not dealing with much. And once Dorian's gone, we're done with that. We're going to be hot. We're going to be sunny. So again, our forecast here, no major impacts expected locally. That's great news. That is great news. That is great news. In the east coast of Florida, things are really improving for them as well, with weaker storm moving up the coast and further away from the coast. So those are the two things that we were hoping for the east coast of Florida, and they're both coming true. Dorian has picked up its speed finally. This morning it was still stationary, and we are finally seeing it move 2 miles per hour, but it's anything's better than stationary. So we're going to continue to track this for y'all through the rest of this week. But again, once it starts working up past the Carolinas, it is going to move quick, and it is going to turn extra tropical, probably bringing snow to Greenland down the road. Not something that we have to worry about. Call me a nut, but after all this work, I'd like a little storm. You know, Jennifer, I think there probably are some people who feel the same as you, as crazy as that may sound. The preparation, again, folks have been preparing for a week now, buying supplies, taking off time from work, boarding up your house, boarding up family members' houses. It is a tedious process, and on top of all that, you have to evacuate. Again, I have family all up and down the East Coast, and they've been going through that, and you don't want to feel like you did it for nothing. But you're going to get some gusty winds. You're going to get some squally weather in the next couple of days. It may not be exactly what you expected with a major hurricane impacting you, but I think that I speak for most people when I say that I'm glad we're not getting a major hurricane hitting the East Coast. You're still going to get your squalls and your tropical storm force weather, which is something if you live along the coast. For us here locally, again, we're not getting anything here in Tallahassee. It might be a little breezy tomorrow, but that's it. It's going to be hot and sunny. It's going to be brutal out there. But again, good news for the most part as Dorian continues to kind of climb up this east coast. Again, it is going to ride right up the coastline. This is exactly what Matthew did in 2016. Matthew brought some stronger winds, though. It was a little closer to the shore. It was a Cat 4 when it went up the Florida East Coast. So this, if you compare it to Matthew, might have a little bit lesser of an impact, which again, that's not a bad thing. You can expect the usual, trees, palm fronds being knocked down, fences, maybe some mailboxes, but you're not going to see any real structural damage to houses, to buildings, if it's tropical storm force winds. Building codes are pretty strict for these beachside areas up and down the East Coast in Florida, so that should not be an issue that we come across here. And also, I wanted to add on, we've been talking about Dorian a lot, but there are a handful of other areas out there in the tropics to keep an eye on. I think I did make this graphic. Here we go. There's a handful of other areas. Again, here's Dorian right off the East Coast. You got this tropical wave that has medium development chances near Puerto Rico, 40%, or Bermuda, excuse me. That's far away though. That's not going to be an issue. You see it's moving up. Then you got these two out there in the Atlantic. Again, this one, 90% that's likely to develop. Probably not going to be an issue as that thing is already moving north. This one, it's something to keep an eye on, 60%, medium chance for development. Again, this thing is a week and a half, 2 weeks away across the Atlantic, so it's not an immediate concern. I wouldn't call this a threat to us, but something to watch as those tropical waves that kind of stay low in latitude work across the Atlantic Ocean. It's always something. We're a week away from the peak of Atlantic hurricane season, so we'll be keeping our eyes on it. There's one that my face is blocking right now. It's in the Western Gulf. I wonder if we can get to it. I don't think I can drag over to it. It is in the Western Gulf, but it's a potential tropical cyclone. I think they're just upgrading it to a tropical depression this morning. That's not an issue. It's in the Western Gulf, and it's gonna be moving on shore over near Mexico. So it's not something that we need to be worried about. But it's always important to pay attention to what's going on out in the tropics during September. Again, this is our peak, September 10th. That is the day that Typically, the Atlantic averages the most energy. So, again, if you do live up and down the East Coast and you're watching this, you got shower storms that are pushing onshore thanks to Dorian. If you zoom in here, you can take a look at some of this rain. This is pretty gusty, squally stuff. If you're up near Volusia, Flagler County right now, you're getting in on that. If you're down in Brevard, Indian River, it's really just stretching up and down the entire East Coast. So again, that's not a hurricane, major hurricane that it feels like, but you're going to get some 20, 30, 40 mile per hour wind gusts, and it's going to be, again, squally is kind of the best way to put it. It's not exactly pleasant weather. You're not going to want to be outside, but expect that up through today and tomorrow. Dorian's going to continue to track a little bit westward and then right up the coast. You saw there about 70 miles off as it continues to move up and away from Florida, not making a landfall, not something that we are worried about. So for areas and parts of South Florida, we're just about 100 miles offshore right now. It should track a little bit closer to the East Coast today as it moves northwest. It's going to be picking up speed, but maybe 40, 50 miles at its closest. I think that's about the extent of it. We're not going to be seeing this thing move in and make a landfall as that trough pushes it back out and it finds that kind of escape route up the Atlantic coast off into the Atlantic. So nothing really to be majorly concerned about, especially locally speaking. If you live up and down the coast, again, the time is now for folks who evacuated yesterday to hunker down, decide what they're doing. But tropical storm force winds, I think, is about what the extent of we're going to see. Thankfully, it is staying a little bit offshore. So that's what we're working with. Not many questions coming in, so I think that we're going to be able to wrap this up. We do have the midday show here. I'll be on there on midday with our anchor Angela Green. We're going to be breaking down the latest in the preparations for this, and not only this, but your local forecast. Again, we get really in-depth in Dorian on these discussions, but we get to talk more about what's going on outside your window right now and what we're going to be seeing in our 7 days. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to prepare for that show. Got to get ready. Got to build some new graphics, update these tropical things. If you guys have any questions, you can always shoot them in the inbox. Follow us on Facebook there. We're on Twitter, too. Download the Storm Shield app. You can get that and watch our forecast and watch radar, whatever you want. I got the app on my phone. It pushes those watches warnings to your phone. It's pretty good stuff. So I do appreciate you guys sticking with me here this morning in the past few days. We'll be doing these until it's kind of out of Florida's hair for good. So probably tomorrow we'll be talking more about this. I know later on this afternoon, evening, Chief Meteorologist Casanova Nurse will be hopping on, probably by early afternoon, to do some updates with you before those shows as well. So we really do appreciate all you guys. Hope you all have a great rest of your morning, great lunch, great afternoon. Tune into midday with us on ABC, WTXL 27 there, and we're going to be breaking down the latest details on your local forecast and Dorian. Again, I hope you all have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow.